like to introduce Mr. Lausin to you today. He is so kind to visit our class and share some important information about being a veteran. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My name is Michael Lausin, and I spent 6 years in the Navy from 1973 through 1979. I was in during the Vietnam War, but I was never in Vietnam. I was considered what they call a Cold War warrior, where instead of doing the hot war in Southeast Asia, which was going on at that time, I did all my time in the Mediterranean playing games with the Russians, some very, very dangerous games with the Russians. We'd play big games of chicken with the ships and see who would blink first. And luckily, knock on wood, we didn't have any bad incidents that could cause people to be injured or to lose their life. I was assigned, after I went to technical school out in California, where I was assigned a rating to repair computers on board the ship. So I got all my technical training almost a little over 40 years ago on computers. And the stuff that I learned 40 years ago is pretty much still the same on the inside, but the computers that I worked on were this big, and this thing's spec sheet says that it was 38 inches wide, 32 inches deep, and 6 feet tall. And I have more power in my cell phone than this computer did here, and I'll pass this around and you guys can look at those computers. They were really big. We had 3 of those on board the ship that would handle the tracking and the weapon systems on board the ship. So they had a bunch of people up there that were sat in front of radar screens, and they would watch for contacts showing up on radar, or if the sonar people, which is the underwater stuff, would get a contact. They'd put it up on the computer screen, and then as long as that contact stayed on the same course and speed, the computer would automatically follow it. And then from there, if they determined that it was hostile, they would hand it off to the weapons people, and then they would make a determination of whether they want to shoot a gun at it or shoot a missile at it, or shoot an ASROC, which is an anti-submarine rocket, where they'd actually shoot a rocket out that had a torpedo on the top of it, and then it would deploy the torpedo and go after the submarine. So we had a lot of sophisticated things that we played with on the ship. We also, it wasn't all work. We did have a lot of fun time on board the ship. Those same computer systems, we used to play a game on there called Star Trek. And it had a spiral galaxy on it, and we could work independently, or we could work with other people on other ships using radio communications between the ships. And but the computer cheated. So whenever you were running low on ammunition and you were going back to the starbase to refuel or get ammunition, they'd usually put 4 or 5 Klingons on the starbase or near the starbase, and you'd have to fight your way through them in order to be able to refuel and rearm. But it was a lot of fun, and it was actually the best diagnostic test that we had for our equipment without actually firing anything. Let's see, I did 2 tours in the Mediterranean. They were about 6 months each, and since I was on a nuclear-powered ship, there were a lot of places that we went that we could not tie up to a pier. We had to anchor out, and then we had to take small boats from the ship to the shore so we could go out on liberty and have a good time. Sometimes those small boats are rocking and rolling, so getting on and off the ship, you have to kind of anticipate, okay, is the boat going up or is it going down? And you have to step off the platform at the right time, so it's either a very short step or a very long, wet fall. So, but I saw a lot of places. I mean, there's a lot of things that I saw when I was growing up at your age of seeing in the history books, being able to go to the Vatican in Rome and being able to wander around the Vatican Museum there and some of the antiquities that they had there. There's actually in the Vatican Museum, there's all kinds of mummies there. They actually had the 2nd largest collection of mummies outside of the Cairo Museum in Egypt, which I've also been to. I saw the pyramids in Egypt. I was actually inside a pyramid, And having grown up on, the Explorer movies of them breaking into the tomb and all this gold and everything, you had to go down this little narrow passageway, which was probably maybe about as wide as this table here. And you had to go down a ramp, and then you had to go up a ramp. It was pretty steep. And you come out in this tiny little room, and all there is this broken stone box where the actual sarcophagus was. Nothing on the walls. It was rather anticlimactic. And I was kind of disappointed, but I could always say I was inside of a pyramid. You've seen pictures of the Sphinx. That's the thing that looks like it's got the face of a human and the body of a lion. That thing is enormous. Matter of fact, there aren't any buildings in Craig that are as tall as that thing is tall. I think it was about 6 or 8 stories high, and it's pretty huge. I've been to a lot of countries over there, and one thing I found that there's no place like the United States. I mean, for the things that we have here that a lot of us take for granted, the freedoms that we have, but being able to see some of that old, quote, old world stuff was very interesting. They said join the Navy and see the world. Well, I saw about half of it, and it's some pretty interesting stuff, but again, there's no place like home.
Home sweet home.
Home sweet home, yes, that's correct. One of the tours that I did, we happened to coincide with the Queen Elizabeth's 25-year anniversary being on the throne over in England. And they had invited ships from all the different countries that used to be either part of the Commonwealth or still part of the Commonwealth. And there was over 100 ships lined up down in Portsmouth, England. And I met sailors from Australia, New Zealand, India, the UK. Of course, there was us Americans. And then they invited some other different countries to help them celebrate it. And it was one big party for a week long. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to a couple of different parties to represent my ship, along with some other sailors from other countries. So I got to know some people from different countries, and we had a good time. I met the Lord Mayor of, I believe it was Portsmouth, and when I heard Lord Mayor, I go, what's that? And they said, well, that's just a title for him. Many things that they talk about overseas kind of sound foreign to us because we have, different types of government and different way of doing things here that may have started out, since we were a colony of England, that has radically changed since then. I did bring along my cruise book, which was from one of the cruises that I went on. And in here, there's some pictures of some of the different places that we had gone to, and there's some interesting pictures in here about the ship and the task group that we were involved with. And I can pass this around so you guys can take a look at that and see a little bit about shipboard life. And then they have all the different people in there, and there's a funny little poem in there about us coming back from being 6 months out at sea. There used to be, I was stationed out in Norfolk, Virginia, and there used to be a thing, sailors and dogs keep off the grass, because Norfolk is a big Navy installation there. And as much as they depended upon the military to support their economy down there, they really didn't like us too well. And so the Navy got even with them one payday. Normally they paid us in a check, and this time they paid us in $2 bills. And they paid everybody there. So we're talking probably over 50,000 people got paid in $2 bills. And they told those merchants, at the end of this weekend, count up how many $2 bills you have. And you'll see how dependent you are on the military being here, and you might want to be nicer to us. So that's pretty much all I really have prepared. So if you want to ask some questions and things like that. Gentleman in the back there.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
Did you go to boot camp?
Yes, I did. I spent 6 weeks on boot camp. I went to San Diego, and it was during the rainy season. down there, and I was the only one in my company that didn't have a raincoat. And so I was wet a lot.
How hard was boot camp?
There were a couple of different portions of boot camp. There was the physical training part of boot camp, which was pretty hard to do. I mean, because you have to be physically fit in order to be able to get through some of the stuff there. But there was also a lot of education where I had to go to classes and read books on different things having to do with the Navy and actually take tests. You know, so they taught us, if you didn't know how to swim, they would teach you how to swim. They taught us, I don't remember any of them, but they did teach us how to tie some knots. But they taught us, you know, in case there's a chemical or a nuclear attack, what you're supposed to do to protect yourself, and then how to decontaminate yourself and things like that. So it wasn't that difficult, but it was very challenging, and I was glad it was over with.
If you had to pick one thing to go to the Navy with you, what would it be?
Ooh. Go to the Navy with. Well, since I was young and I was only 19 years old and never had been out of my hometown, which I grew up in Cleveland, I really can't say what there was one thing. I mean, I went there with an open mind and, you know, looking at the world, because I'd never been on an airplane before, so I had to fly there. So it was all new and different, so it was just an open mind of, you know, accepting new and different things is really what's about the only thing I can think of.
Putting you on the spot.
Did you, in the Navy, did you know a man named Robert Hoyd?
Robert? No, I didn't.
Also, how much food did you get?
Food was actually pretty plentiful on board the ship, with the exception of one time. They actually ran 4 meals a day. We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then what they called mid-rats or midnight rations. So those of us that had to go on watch at midnight or after, they had a meal available for us. I was fortunate that I got to know the night bakers. And so whenever they had fresh bread, and we did bake our own bread and things like that, they do the cinnamon rolls for breakfast in the morning, I'd always make sure I was down there to see, okay, what can I scarf from the night bakers to help supplement my evening. So.
Did they give you any pets?
Nope, couldn't have pets on board the ship. There was this mythical thing called the sea bat, and it's actually it actually goes back quite a few years about somebody capturing a bat, and what they do is they put it under a bucket, and they'd throw a little bit of seawater around it, and they'd thump the bucket every once in a while to make it sound like there's something there, and the whole idea is to get you down on your hands and knees with your butt up in the air, and as you're lifting this bucket up, somebody comes up with a broom and swats you in the butt. Yes, sir?
What effect did the war have on your physical or mental health?
Fortunately, I wasn't involved in the war, so I came out of the Navy very healthy. So it's unlike some of my counterparts that spent time in Southeast Asia and were exposed to things like Agent Orange, which causes cancer and birth defects and all kinds of really bad things to happen to your body. I was lucky enough that I didn't have to worry about things like that.
Did you want to go to the Navy, or were you drafted?
I wanted to go to the Navy. My draft number, and back then they had this lottery that you didn't want to win. My number was 181, so there wasn't any chance that I would get called or drafted. But I was in a position where I couldn't afford to go to school. My parents couldn't afford to send me to school. And so I saw it as a way to get an education. So I learned my computer stuff in the Navy. I have a computer company here, so I'm still using what I learned over 40 years ago in my day-to-day life. So I was able to get a good trade out of it, which was very fortunate, which was what my goal was, is to be able to get an education and get something that will carry me into the civilian life. The other part of it is that they have a program, and I think they still do have a program, what was called PACE. When we were deployed, they would actually take and put college professors on board the ship, and they would ride with us during our deployment. And after we got off our job, our normal job ran from about 7:30 till about 4 o'clock, and then after that we were off. And so unless you had watch where you had to keep an eye on things in your workspace, you were free to do whatever you wanted to do the rest of the evening. Usually evening chow would start about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and then about 6 o'clock they would have the classes. The professors would set up in either the ship's library or the workout room or whatever, and they would actually hold college classes. So I was able to take a lot of my freshman courses of like English and history, psychology, algebra, and stuff like that on board the ship, and I didn't have to go through the regular college curriculum of sitting in a class with 500 people of trying to learn this stuff. And it was a very small environment similar to this, and it was actually a lot of fun. I still remember we were doing, it was English literature, and we were doing Shakespeare, and so we actually put on a play and everybody had a part. And we had one guy that pulled a mop head, and I can't remember what play we were doing, and stuck it on his head. Okay, he was the girl. So, yes.
I have a few questions. Have you ever earned an award?
My department did. Actually, it did twice. I was in the computer department, or the operations navigation department is actually what it was. And we won, we won an award twice for what's called battle efficiency, which means that all of our equipment was up, it was running according to the way it was supposed to, and then when we did the exercises that we were supposed to, we were able to support those exercises.
Okay, 2 more questions. What was your title?
I was a data systems technician 2nd class. The 2nd class was my rank. The ranking goes from E1, which is a seaman recruit, then it goes to seaman apprentice, then seaman, and that's 3 stripes, three stripes on the shoulder, and then you get your crow, which with 1 chevron, which makes you petty officer 3rd class, and then I had 2 chevrons, which made me a petty officer 2nd class.
Okay, what kind of gun did you use, if you used a gun at all?
I had to stand watch when we were in port. I had to stand watch on the quarterdeck, and so I was issued a 45 caliber 1911 Colt semi-automatic. I was also qualified on the Browning automatic rifle, and I only got to shoot that once, but I guess I did well enough that I could be qualified in that. Oh, let's see. How about this gentleman back there?
What do you think about war today?
War today. War is not healthy for children and other living things. And that's a saying that comes out of the 60s when Vietnam was going on. I really wish we were more civilized. War, I mean, we are fortunate here that we don't see it. It's a terrible thing. Too many people have lost their lives because of political purposes or other reasons. Greed comes to mind. And it needs to be avoided at all costs because besides the monetary costs, the cost of human lives on both the people that are in the military and the civilians in the areas where the war is being fought is just too high. This gentleman right here.
What type of clothes did you wear in the Navy?
We were issued several different types of uniforms. The one that I wore most was actually a pair of jeans and a blue chambray shirt. It was a cotton shirt, and a ball cap is pretty much what I wore day to day on board the ship. And then if I was standing watch, if we were in port, depending on the season, it would either be my dress whites or dress blues if it was wintertime. Young lady back here.
Do you have any pets to this day?
Do I have any what?
Pets.
Pets? Yeah, I've got 3 little doggies at home.
So do I.
Yeah, they're yappy little schnauzers, and but they keep my wife and I company because all our kids are grown and gone. Yes.
So, how old were you when you joined the Navy?
I was 19. So I was I had just gotten out of high school. I was 18 when I graduated in June, and I joined the Navy in August of that year under what was called the Delayed Enlistment Program. And but I didn't actually go on active duty until February, and that's when I went to boot camp, and then went from there to technical schools after that. So let's see.
How many kids do you have?
I don't have any children. My wife does. Has 3 children. We've got 3 grandchildren. My youngest granddaughter is 15. The oldest one is, let's see, I think he turned 22 or 23. He's a big guy. Yeah, so, yes, young lady.
Did you like being in the Navy? And if so, why?
Yes and no. The Navy part itself, I really didn't enjoy. Okay, because you know, somebody's telling you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, you know, all the time. The other part of the Navy, the travel, I mean, being able to see things that you've only seen in a book or in the movies, was wonderful. I mean, because there was, you know, an opportunity to see things that I probably would never have the opportunity to see again. I loved my job, and there was a difference between what my job was and the Navy part of things. Because I really enjoyed working on the computer systems, and I had people that worked for me, and so being a boss, more or less, of a couple of people was very rewarding. And some of the experiences that I got from there, like I said, they last a lifetime.
How big was the bullet shells on the ship?
The bullet shells? We had a 5-inch 54 caliber. We actually had 2 5-inch 54 caliber guns on board the ship. So the shell itself was about 5 inches big, and they were about that long is the bullet part with the explosives. And then on the back side of that was the actual shell part that had the gunpowder in it that shot it out. The guns on board the ship were computer controlled, so as the ship is rocking back and forth, the gun is actually moving up and down in anticipation of which way the ship is going to rock. And we had a radar on board the ship that spun fast enough that when we shot the gun, we could actually see the bullet go out on the radar screen, and we could take out a rock about the size of a 27-inch television set from 5 miles away. So they were pretty accurate.
Were you ever in a war?
No, I was just in what they called the Cold War, where you know, we fought against communism at that time, and it was a matter of wills and politics and things like that. But each military did get involved, and like I said, we did play some dangerous games.
How long were you in the Navy, and how long have you been retired out of the Navy?
Okay, I was in the Navy for 6 years. The reason I signed up for 6 was to get the training that I wanted. I had to commit to 6 years. I've been out since 1979, so we're about 35 years I've been out. But there were a lot of things that I've learned there that I still do today. My wristwatch, it isn't in 12-hour time, it's in 24-hour time. So, you know, when I write something in an appointment book, like I have an appointment at 1 o'clock this afternoon, I actually wrote 1300 in my appointment book.
What was your family's background?
Let's see, my dad was in the military during the Korean War. He was in the Army during that. He was a language specialist, and he was drafted during Korea. My mom was a homemaker, because that's what they did back then. A lot of moms didn't work back then. And we were pretty much, I wouldn't say middle class, we may have been lower middle class. We lived in a 3-bedroom apartment. I'm the oldest of 7. And so I've got a bunch of younger siblings, 3 sisters and 3 brothers. Let's see, who hasn't? Let's see, young lady there, you haven't asked a question.
Do you remember any of the people that you worked with?
I do remember a few. Actually, I have kept in contact with a couple of them, and they've been up here to visit me, which is kind of good. And I've been back back east where they live to visit them. And one of the things that we always talked about is, you know, what are we going to do when we get out of the Navy, or where we're going to go? And we had a joke at that time, is that we're going to put an oar over our shoulder and we're going to start walking inland, and when somebody asks us what it is, that's where we were going to stop. Some of the people I worked with, they're still in the computer industry. Some of them did something that was totally different. Young man in the blue sweatshirt.
You know how you said when you would stay on the ship to see if for anybody around or something?
Oh, when I stood watch?
Yeah. Would you guys like the people that were sleeping? Would you guys swap off if you were tired and you wanted to swap off with someone else?
We could trade duty with other people, but it had to be approved by somebody higher up than us. But when we were in port, it was pretty much an 8-hour workday. And then if you had, we had a duty day every 3 days, so it was basically, we'd work an 8-hour day. If it wasn't our duty day, we were off until 7:30 the next morning. And if you lived on board the ship, you pretty much stayed on board the ship. I was fortunate that I shared an apartment one time, a couple of different houses, some other times with other guys on board the ship. So I was able to actually go home and get off the ship when it wasn't our duty day. And then when I did have duty, I had to hang out, and we would do drills. So at night, they would usually have a fire drill or some kind of casualty drill. And so we'd have to practice, and it's always practicing, because you never know when an emergency might take place. So,
were a lot of guys on board the ship nice to you?
yeah, we pretty much got along with everybody else. I mean, when you have 600 people crammed into a space that's 600 feet long and 61 feet wide, and you're with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, especially when you're deployed, you pretty much have to be nice to each other, because having tension on board the ship isn't good, and bad things can happen. So,
How big was your ship?
it was 600 feet long and 61 feet wide. It drew 45 feet of water, which means that from the water line down to the bottom of the ship was 45 feet. And it was about, I think it was 55 or 65 feet tall from the deck on up. And I can't remember how much it weighed. A bunch. Let's see, who hasn't, someone back there.
Could you still get the position that you had?
I'm too old. It wouldn't take me.
When I get older, can I get it?
Let's see. They took my rating, or the job that I did, and they rolled it into another electronics rating, but yep, it's still available. It's changed a little bit, of course, considering the stuff that I worked on, 40 years ago. But computers are computers, and they pretty much work the same. So, yeah, they're still there. Computers still control the ships.
What inspired you to join the Navy?
To get an education is really what it was. I just couldn't afford to do it on my own, so have to take the good with the bad sometimes.
Where was you born and raised?
I was born at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, because my dad was in the Army at that time. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, or actually the suburbs of Cleveland. And then I've lived a whole bunch of places since then, after I had gotten out of high school.
Okay, what year were you born?
1953. So I'm one of those mid-century people. I just love it on those do-it-yourself shows. We got a mid-century home here. So I guess I'm a mid-century person. Right.
So, did you have missiles on your ship?
Yes, we did. We had 2 missile launchers, one in the front and one in the back. If I remember right, they carried a magazine of about 40 of them. Plus, we also had missiles that launched torpedoes. So if we had to go after a submarine, we were capable of doing that. And they also had some other things on there that I'm not allowed to talk about. After 4 years.
Did you get to see one of some of the missiles go off?
Oh yeah, we would go down to the missile range outside of Puerto Rico, down in the Caribbean, and they had a missile range down there, so we would do exercises there. They have a big training center in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and we would do training exercises there. The funny thing about Guantanamo is that it's part of it's on the island of Cuba, which has a communist government. But back during the Spanish-American War, they actually had a perpetual lease to lease space for the Navy base there. But in order for ships to get to Guantanamo City, they have to go right through the middle of the Navy base. And since the Cubans and the Russians were very good friends, we would have Russian naval ships going right through the middle of the American Navy base so they could tie up to the pier in Guantanamo City. So it was kind of funny that way. Young man there, black.
Oh, what's your football team?
Pardon?
What's your favorite football team?
Don't really have one, because I'm married to a diehard Broncos fan and Broncos.
Yes!
But I grew up on the Cleveland Browns.
No!
Hey, I couldn't be a Raiders fan.
You could be a Bronco fan.
Young man.
Did you know, I have 2 questions. Did you know anybody when you started the Navy?
No, I didn't. But I had some friends from high school that had joined the Navy, either after me or before me, and I did run across, actually, I ran across one guy. I was walking down a pier in Norfolk, and there was a band playing on the ship, because a lot of guys are into music and things like that, so they take their instruments and up on deck and plug in and play. And I happened to be walking down the pier, and I heard this band playing, so I was standing there, and a couple other people were kind of joining around, and I happened to look over, and I looked at the guy, and I says, I know you. And it was a guy I grew up with in Ohio. And so you run into people in the craziest places. There was another guy that after I had gotten out of the Navy, he was a very good friend of mine on the ship. He's since passed away. But I was in downtown St. Louis working, and I was coming around the corner of a building, and he was coming the other direction, and we stopped about that far away from each other because we were going to bump into each other, and I looked up and I go, I know you. And he goes, what are you doing here? So, yes,
I have another
oh, you do? Okay.
What date did you start the Navy?
February 12th, 1973 was when I went on active duty. I actually had joined the Navy in the prior August, which had some advantages. One is that I would be able to reserve a seat in a school, so I was able to get a guaranteed school. And the other is that 6-month period of time that I spent on inactive duty actually went towards my time in grade. So when I was up for promotions and pay grade raises and things like that, that 6 months that I spent messing around actually counted as my service time.
What was your favorite place to visit?
Wow. Let's see. Gibraltar was pretty cool. They actually have a big inside. You've seen the Rock of Gibraltar in the Prudential ad, right? Well, it does look like that. Inside of it, there's actually a bunch of caverns in there. It's called St. Michael's Cave, I believe it is, and I don't know if it's in the cruise book or not.
I saw
Was it? Okay, yeah. And they have it all lit up with different colored lights, and there's the stalactites and the stalagmites and stuff like that. They also, on the outside, they have rock monkeys. And you need to keep track of everything that you have on you because they will come up and pick your pockets and then run away.
Really?
Yep. Let's see. Egypt was very interesting, again, from the historical aspect. I was fortunate enough that we went to Cairo, to the Egyptian Museum there, and that's where they have the largest collection of mummies. But at the time, they were just building what was called the Aswan Dam on the Nile River, so they took a lot of the antiquities from there and put them in the the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. I also saw King Tut's stuff, and he was actually, I think it was either 25 or 35 boxes. The biggest box, that it started out at the size of a 2-car garage, and it was made out of teak wood that had all kinds of beaten gold on the outside of it, and then there was another box that slid inside of it, and it just continued getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it got to its actual sarcophagus. And so it was just one big box after another, and it was pretty amazing. That area of the museum was closed off, and so I gave, there was a guy wandering around and says, "Psst, I'll take you down there, $5. And so, you know, a bunch of us paid him $5, and he took us down into, I don't know if it was really closed off or not, but, you know, we were young and dumb, and it was a chance to see some things that, that we had never seen before, so it was very interesting. Outside of the pyramids, they had guys that had camels that would give you camel rides. The camel rides were free. To get down off the camel cost you $5. They would be more than happy to take a picture for you on your camera for free. If you wanted your camera back, it cost you $3. So, but Rome was pretty interesting. Athens, Greece was very interesting. Unfortunately, pollution has taken its toll on a lot of the old buildings and stuff like that. So the acids from the pollution ate away at the stone. So a lot of the things that were etched in the stone or carved in the stone are all either gone or they've been eroded away by the pollution. Italy, it's an urban renewal project waiting to happen. I mean, it's really old. I mean, you got to understand that Europe is a very, very old place in contrast to the United States. I mean, Europe's been around for, you know, forever, where the United States has only been around since the 16 or 1700s. And so there's a lot of things that are very, very old there, buildings and statues and things like that. So let's see, where else? Norway. Norway was a very interesting place. They have a sculpture garden there that, and I don't know if the cruise book has any of those pictures in it or not. I was looking for some pictures and I couldn't find a lot of my old pictures. But they have a really cool sculpture garden. I was on shore patrol, and we were stationed with the local police in Oslo. And so they put us in their little VW bus, and they said, we're going to go see the King's Palace. So we drive down the street, and we get to the palace. He drives up on the curb and drives into the courtyard and says, yeah, if the king was here, he'd be up in that window up there. And so we left there, and he says, well, I'll take you over to the sculpture garden. So we get to the park, and there's all these sidewalks and stuff. He bumps up the curb and drives down the sidewalk and takes us to all the different carvings in the sculpture garden. There's an old ski area there. I think it's from the 1952 Olympics. The ski jump is still there. And so he took us up. It was actually near sunset. And again, I wish I could have found the picture for that because I have a really cool picture. They have where the ski jump is. They got this thing kind of like an outline of a skier going down the ski jump, kind of hanging on a wire. And so I've got kind of like a couple of darkened pine trees and the sunset in the background, illuminating this little sculpture or this little metal thing. And so it was kind of cool. But I think those were pretty much my favorite places that I went to. Young lady back there.
What play did you do on the ship? And if you remember, what part did you play?
Oh, wow. I know we did a couple of them, but if I don't remember what part I did. I mean, we were just having a good time, so it was, I'm sorry, I don't remember. It's too long ago. Let's see.
When you were in Rome, did you see the Tiber River?
Yes, actually went across it. I was fortunate enough that I have been to some of the places that I was at in the Navy with my wife. We did a 10-day, we called it our Eatin' and Drinkin' Fast and Furious tour across Europe. And it was basically, we were on a bus with 40 other people, and we started in the UK, went over to France, we went to Rome, and a couple other places, but we had some time on our own, and so we caught a cab to go see some of the sites like the Spanish Steps and stuff. And traffic in Rome is kind of strange. They have streets like we do, but the traffic doesn't always follow the traffic lanes. So you may have 2 lanes of traffic coming this direction, and 2 lanes going that direction, and another 2 lanes going each way. And so we were cruising around and went around the Sistine Chapel and stuff, and we got back to the hotel, and the whole time my wife's got a death grip on my hand and on the door, because this guy's driving like a maniac. And she made the comment, she thought she whispered it to me, of this guy thinks he's Mario Andretti. And so we get back to the hotel, and the guy opens up the door, and he goes, Mario Andretti. But no, some of the places I hung out when I was in the Navy and I went back to, they weren't very nice.
Yeah, because the Tiber River is a very, very big
Yep. Yeah, it's very wide.
historical site in
Yep.
Rome.
Yes, it is.
A big part of its history.
Yep, it is. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah, there's some neat catacombs in Rome too. Ryan.
So when you went overseas, did you ever go through the Panama Canal?
No, I didn't when I was in the Navy, but I have been on a cruise ship. I've actually been through the Panama Canal twice with my wife. Once we went from the west side to the east side, and you all know what the Continental Divide is?
Yeah.
You know, Rabbiniers Pass and, and all that. Well, when you're going through the Panama Canal and you hit the Continental Divide, it's a pile of rocks about this high. And they have a sign there that says Continental Divide. Let's see, young lady.
How did you feel when the war ended?
I was actually very, very glad that it was over with. I was in tech school up in Vallejo, California, where I was getting my computer training, and I was very glad it was ending because our guys were coming home, and there wouldn't be any more anybody getting killed. If you have the opportunity and you go to Washington, D.C., go take a look at the Vietnam Wall. It's very awe-inspiring and very moving. And there's 58,000 plus names that are on that wall, all because of politics. Well, I got one from when I was in the Silver Jubilee back in 1977. I actually wore that on my jacket. I got to get my wife to sew some of my patches that I had on this jacket. This happens to be my ship's jacket. My family got this for me for Christmas last year, and so I'm going to have some of my older patches probably sewn onto this one. I did bring back a piece of the rock. I mean, because back then, again, Prudential and a piece of the rock was pretty prevalent, and my dad at the time was in the insurance business, and so I was up on the Rock of Gibraltar, and I gathered up some stones and brought it back for him, and I said, well, now you got your own piece of the rock, and he thought that was pretty humorous. A lot of good memories. You know, there's good times and bad times, but as you get older, you tend to remember the good times more than the bad stuff. The Russians were interesting. They played, like I said, we played some very, very dangerous games with the Russians. But they were just like us. I mean, they're people. You know, just you know, another different country, different form of government, and you know, when you go into the military, you know, you're there to support your government. And when we would go ashore and we knew that a Russian ship was in the same harbor with us, they would tell us that there were areas that were off limits. You know, so the crews weren't mixing it up, and you know, them getting in trouble, us getting in trouble. But their ships were very interesting. Their cruisers, I can't remember if it's the Moskva or the Leningrad, but it's a helicopter carrying ship. So in the front of the ship is radars and guns and missile directors and missile launchers and stuff like that. And then the superstructure just kind of cuts off, and they have a big helo deck or a helicopter deck in the back. Now their helicopters, like our helicopters just have one rotor, they had two, and they turned in opposite directions. Their planes, a lot of their bombers, and they still use them, were propeller driven because they were more efficient on fuel, and instead of the propellers being on the front of the wing, they were on the back of the wing. So they were pushers instead of pullers. So, you know, their aircraft and their ships were very interesting to see and stuff like that.
When you were playing with the Russian, did they like intend to hurt you or?
No, it was more of a game of intimidation. Like I said, it was a big game of chicken. Who blinks first? There was, but we had fun with them. We did a thing that the Russians couldn't do for whatever reason called unwrap or underway replenishment. That's where you have two or more ships side by side, and we're cruising along at about 30 miles an hour, and we're about less than a football field apart, and we run lines between the two ships, and that's how we would get our supplies. And so they'd take a big cargo net, and put pallets on it, and with all the supplies, our food and parts and stuff like that, mail, and they'd hook the cargo net up to a hook, and they'd run it across the wire over to our ship. And that's also how we would rearm the ship. If we shot the guns or the missiles, they would send the guns, the rearmaments back over that way. And then if somebody was sick or they needed to get off the ship, they had a bosun's chair that they would hook to that hook and put them in. And that chair was very, very narrow. There's just enough room to get your body on there, and they'd strap you in and they'd send you across the line to the other ship. And with the ships very close to each other, the seas would get very high because it's like a funnel, and so the ships are rocking and rolling and going side to side and up and down. And the Russians were very interested in how we did that. And every once in a while, a case of fruit would fall off the ship. Well, I guess, and they'd pick it up, you know, and we were doing an exercise one day, and they were watching us, and there was a bunch of us up on what's called the signal bridge, which is on the top of the ship, and that's where the guys with the flags, they would do flight communications or light communications between ships. And there was a bunch of us up there, and we were kind of goofing off, and there was a Russian, they called them trawlers. They were a spy ship is really what they were. And so they'd wave and smile, and we'd wave and smile, and they'd wave and smile, and we'd wave and smile, and guys we looked at each other, and we turned around, and we dropped our trousers, and we shot them the moon. And they were waving in, they go, ooh. So about 3 months later, we ran across this same Russian trawler, and we did the wave and the smile and the wave and the smile, and they got us the first time instead of us getting them. So, but it was, like I said, it was dangerous games that we played. It was a game of intimidation, of who blinked first. And, of course, we tried not to blink first, and, of course, they tried not to blink first, but somebody had to, so. You have a question?
What? I can't find. Okay. So, what kind of your favorite meal did you have while you were on the ship?
Thanksgiving and Christmas, other than mid-rats. They put on a feast at Thanksgiving and Christmas. This is where the guys, I need to edit.
You're good.
We're good? Okay. This is where the guys on the mess decks would really shine. They would freeze big blocks of ice, and they would have ice carving competitions. They would, for Thanksgiving, I mean, there'd be nothing to have, 75 or 100 turkeys there, and all the fixings for it. Every once in a while, we would have cookouts on the fantail. We had a band on board the ship, and they would call it Steel Beach because the deck was made of steel, and of course we didn't have any sand, but we would have a cookout back on the fantail and basically have a ship's party. The band would play, and we would put on skits and things like that, those were probably the best times. And like I said, mid-rats, where I was able to finagle, fresh baked bread or some fresh baked cinnamon rolls from the night bakers. So there was, like I said, there was only one time when we didn't have enough food on the ship, and it was 3 days of beans and weenies. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. I'll take it back four times a day, and mid-rats, because they had plenty of those. And we got kind of tired of beans and weenies after a while. Right.
So, when you were in the Navy, what kind of plane, did you guys have any U.S. planes flying over to help you?
We were an escort for an aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, and also the USS America, which is now decommissioned. So we would do what was called plane guard, where we would, we were responsible for a couple of things. One is that if a launch of an aircraft went bad, we would be there to rescue the pilot if there was anything left of it, the aircraft and the pilot. Only did that once, and unfortunately we weren't able to recover the pilot or his backseat mate. We would have helicopters land on the ship all the time, either to bring supplies in or bring people in, and that's pretty much all we did with the planes and stuff like that.
Where was your boot camp located?
It was in San Diego, California, and we would sit, and right next to it was the Marine boot camp. So at night, or in the late afternoon when we'd get off work, we'd sit outside the barracks drinking Cokes and smoking cigarettes at that time, and watching the Marines run, followed by a Navy ambulance, and we'd of course wave and smile. Young lady, you had a question.
So we weren't really in the Vietnam War much, but so was it nice to not be in the war?
Yes. When I joined the military, again, I wasn't going to be drafted, so I had my choice. At that time, join the Army, go to Vietnam. Join the Marine Corps, definitely go to Vietnam. Join the Air Force, maybe go to Vietnam. Join the Navy, closest you'll get is 12 miles offshore. That's a good place for me. I wasn't too enthused about either shooting at somebody or having them shoot at me. But you know, it's whatever your job is. That's what you're supposed to do. So if you're trained to do that, that's what you had to do.
Your dad was in the Army, right?
Yes, he was.
Was he wanting you to go to the Army, or did he think you made a good decision by choosing the Navy?
He actually didn't want me to go in the military at all, because again, the war was going on, and him having been during the Korean War, he wasn't really enthused about it. But I explained to him my reasoning. Again, the primary reason for me going in the military was to get an education, and at that time it was. Again, there were trade-offs. There's good and there's bad, and you know, part of the bad part was that I had to give up 6 years of my life to do it. But again, 40-some-odd years later, that 6 years was well worth the time that I spent. So you know, sacrifices need to be made sometimes, and you just have to pick what the sacrifice is, and hoping that you'll come out on the upside at the end of it. Right.
So, when you guys played chicken and you guys had the line going across, did you ever get sick on the ship and had to go across on one of the lines?
No, I never got sick enough to do that. We did have what's called sick bay. We had a mini hospital on board the ship. As far as getting sick on the ship, I've ridden through 2 hurricanes. And that's where the ship is really rocking and rolling. You've heard the term walking on the walls. Well, when the ship heels over and you're walking down a passageway, gravity will actually make you walk. You'd start walking. If the ship is heeled over enough, you actually walk on the bottom of the wall. And then you walk back the other way as the ship goes the other way. The other is if you're going into the seas and the ship's going up and down like this. I would like this going back and forth a lot better than the up and down stuff. But you had to be careful going down the ladders or the stairwells in the ship because there were times that the seas were so high that, and I happened to have been up on the bridge, which are one of the few places that there are actually windows. That when the ship was heeled over one direction and I looked out to one side of the ship, all I saw was blue sky, and look out the other direction, all you see is green water. An aircraft carrier the deck of an aircraft carrier is 5 stories tall. And I've seen an aircraft carrier take green water over the bow, which means that thing went down into the ocean and the wave hit it and it went over the deck. And there were plenty of times I saw that on my ship, where the water would come back and they would actually tell you can't go on deck because there was a chance that you could get swept overboard. which wasn't a good thing. No, we had one guy jump overboard because he was tired of the Navy and wanted out. And so he jumped overboard, and we did our man overboard drill, counted up, yep, we're missing somebody, and unfortunately, he was in the same berthing compartment. His department was in the same berthing compartment as mine, and so when they picked him up, he didn't want to get on board the boat, and till the bosun mate said, "Shark!" and he wanted on board that boat as fast as he can get, and we had to, he went in the brig, which is the jail. And the bad part is that because we shared berthing compartments, we also had to share brig watch. And so we had to sit there for 4 hours outside of, along with our normal duty. So one time I got off of work at 4, I had to go sit with him until 8 o'clock, and then I had to pull mid-watch. So I was able to get about 2 hours of sleep or 3 hours of sleep, and then go back to work from midnight to 4 in the morning, and then get a couple more hours of sleep, and then go back to work again. So we weren't real happy with him because it was cutting into our sleep time.
So when you were in the Navy, did you ever get on board an aircraft carrier to help or something?
No, I visited one a couple times because I had friends. I had friends on the Nimitz and friends on the America that I had gone through technical school with. I also was on a friend with a guy that I went through tech school on the USS Forrestal, which was one of the most, the ship that had one of the most devastating fires on board. They have a training video, and I don't know if they still show it or not, of them fighting a fire on board the Forrestal, and you watch a fire crew go in with a hose, and this is 10 men, and you watch the hose come back. And so you learn very quickly, even in boot camp, that it's a very, very dangerous job because you're everything. If there's a fire on board, there's no place to walk to because you're surrounded by water. So you got to deal with it right then and there. And if the ship sinks, there's again no place to walk to, and it's a long swim.
So would you rather been on the ship that you were actually on, or on the USS Nimitz, Forrestal, or America?
I was pretty happy with the ship I was on. When you're on an aircraft carrier, you have 5,000 people on board there when there's an air wing on board. So, it's like taking half a Craig with you. Whereas the ship I was on was a lot smaller, and you got to know a lot of the people that were on there, so I think it was a better environment. But not having, the experience of being on a carrier, I don't know. But I was kind of happy with my duty station. It was a very clean ship, and because they made sure that it was clean. And and we saw, like I said, a lot of neat places. Yes, sir?
Oh, you said there was like 600 people in this ship, right?
Right.
Was that like one of the biggest ships, or did you get ships that had less people?
There were ships that had less people. There were destroyers or destroyer escorts that maybe had maybe 200 people on board, 300 people. So there's, ships of different sizes.
And what do the destroyers do?
The destroyers are mostly, they mostly did anti-submarine warfare. So their job was to go hunt for submarines and, keep them away from the aircraft carrier. Unfortunately, the hierarchy of things is the smaller ships are expendable. Meaning that once you fired your guns, fired your missiles, if your job is to get in the way of anything that's trying to hurt the aircraft carrier. And if you happen to get hit and go down, you're expendable. Collateral damage and the cost of war.
What was your favorite thing to do on the ship?
Favorite thing. Work on my equipment. I really, really, really like my job. That and liberty. Being able to get off the ship.
So in the beginning, you guys were saying, you said that you guys played a video game or something?
Yeah, we had the equipment that we had. We had a rudimentary video game called Star Trek, and we also had Pong, which was one of the first video games that ever came out. And the captain didn't like me because I continually beat him at Pong, and he was really good at tennis, but on a court. And I wouldn't touch him there, but he sat down at one of the computer monitors one day and wanted to play, and I happened to get the pick. And when I beat him 3 games in a row, he stood up and he goes, "Who was I playing?" And I kind of went, "Me, sir." And ever since then, I was on his bad side. I didn't know who I was playing, you know. It's one of those ranks has its privileges, and if I knew I was playing the captain, I would have let him win. But I didn't know it was the captain,
It was just
so...
a random pick on who you
Yep,
playing.
on who your partner, yeah.
3 versus Modern 10 or something like that?
Well, it was only a 2-person game, so whoever logged in first and whoever logged in second, that's who you paid. You got paired up with.
That's funny. I was like,
Yeah.
so you put on his bad side?
Yeah, I got it on his bad side just because I beat him at a computer game.
I'm on my dad's bad side. Yes.
What else there, Ryan?
So, Star Trek was the game that you guys played?
Yep.
So, on Star Trek, was it a person? Like, did you face bad guys or something?
Basically, you had a symbol of either a triangle or a half circle. The half circles were the friendlies, and the triangles were the bad guys, the Klingons. And so you basically, again, you got to remember that the computers that we know today with all the graphics and, you know, it looks like a TV show. We didn't have that back then. I mean, it was very, very simple computer games. For their time, they were very sophisticated, but, you know, compared to what they have today is not even close.
I still like to, I do go on my computer once in a while and play Pong.
Pong? Yep.
It's fun.
Yep, it's a lot of fun to play that. Yep. What else?
Oh, I know.
Yes, sir.
The computers that you had back then, were there different controls? Like, were there different controls from these computers now?
Oh, yes. If you saw the picture I passed around, the front panel of this computer, this was the actual front panel of the computer, and it was a bunch of lights, and they were actually push buttons. And so we were actually able to program the computer by pressing the buttons on the front of the computer, and then pressing a button to store it in the memory of the computer. We had one program, we had 3 of these computers next to each other, and have you ever seen Times Square where they have the words that go across on the lights? Well, we had we didn't have computer screens like you have today. We had what was called a teletype, and it was this clunky old thing that actually printed on paper. And we would type in, we'd launch the program, and we'd type in the message that we wanted the computer to say, and it would start on the left-hand computer, and it would build the letters in the lights, and it would then go to the next computer and then the next computer. Like I said, I've got more power in my cell phone than this thing did, and this thing weighed, what did it say, 2,000 pounds? 2,400 pounds. Is how much this computer weighed. So, and back then, like I said, it was pretty sophisticated. And they were water cooled. So they had water that ran through a radiator to keep them from overheating.
Today you just stop playing.
Pardon?
Today you just stop playing the games like, oh.
Yep.
Bye.
Young lady.
How would you stay in contact with like your family and like your friends?
Back then it was snail mail. We didn't have, I mean, you know, long distance calls, but it was mostly letters and cards and stuff like that. So I'd get to a port and buy a bunch of postcards, and we had a post office on board the ship. So I didn't have to, buy foreign stamps or anything like that, but I put, put the stamps on it, address it to my friends and family and mail them home.
Can I guess how old you are?
I'm 60.
Dang.
Don't even have to guess.
You wanted to guess? Sorry.
I was one off.
Yeah.
I said 61.
What I got.
Yeah, I'll be 61 in December.
That's
My dad was a young older.
Let's finish up with Pepper.
That's why I was off.
So you said you ate good on the ship?
Yep.
Like, what all was there in the middle? Like, how many dishes were there?
There was usually 2, sometimes 3, different entrees that we could get. There was always salad. Fresh fruit was depending on how many days we've been away from port.